Welcome to the Gemini Full Moon. It's so good to have you here together in this little corner of the internet. I hope you're all doing really well. To kind of ground us into our shared space together, I'm going to light this candle. Just calling in the energy of clarity as we embark on this divination in terms of tapping into the magic of the Gemini Full Moon, which is going to go exact 4:02 a.m. Ooh, the wind's blowing it around. There we go. 4:02 a.m. on the 15th of December, and that's Eastern time in this Gemini full moon. So if you watched the Sagittarius new moon video, I pulled the archetype of the mirror. And I'm already starting to kind of feel this. I'm filming this video on the 7th of December, so feeling this kind of like wave of kind of like psychedelic, what's the word, like kind of holographic quality to the magic that's really coming in to the collective around this Gemini full moon. And so in this video, I invite you to just get a warm drink. It might be kind of long, but I'm going to share some of the messages that I kind of felt into, as always, the intuitive messages surrounding this video, and then we'll also pull some cards. We'll just flow and see where the energy takes us. And so interestingly, the first theme that I wrote down is visitation of the blue butterfly. And when I feel into this, it kind of, the medicine of the butterfly, of course, there's an element of transformation here, speaking to a level of upheaval that necessitates change, because as always, there's some element of dissatisfaction or just this natural impulse towards growth that can feel really uncomfortable. And so as we step into the new year, 2025, there's a kind of need to shed kind of that whole chrysalis, that whole mythic journey of the butterfly, but with the color blue coming through really strongly. The quality of kind of this connection to the divine, to the transcendent, that we're kind of being cocooned and kind of held in this kind of chrysalis energy as we enter the winter solstice portal, that there's kind of a lot of very protective, benevolent energies around that are supporting us and holding us as we kind of go through that like decomposition rebirth cycle with the energy of the butterfly. The angel number 22222, and when I heard it in my brain, it just kept going on and on and on. And so, especially with Gemini energy, with the moon in Gemini, close to Jupiter, which kind of has a tendency to multiply or expand whatever it touches, making it bigger in some capacity, this kind of theme of things doubling, like the two, things coming in pairs, and then kind of the symbolic meaning of the two and its potential for the energy of creation. The energy of the stork also came through, and I was physically flew through the air as I was kind of sitting with this full moon. And so creation, harmonizing, healing with the two. I think of the Two of Cups in the tarot. We'll see if that card comes out. But yeah, this kind of like the theme of meeting your equal came out. So I feel like a lot of people are doing really deep inner work that is leading towards some sort of really important soul equivalent, soul partner. A lot of changes in the relationship spectrums of our lives, fields of things shifting in that regard. Yeah, the stork is flying overhead but hasn't yet landed. A dream is still constellating and has yet to materialize, was another thing that I wrote down. This energy of things are potent and they have the potential for change. We're walking through this energy of the threshold came through very, 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 very strong. This was an interesting theme. Playing dumb will no longer be internally tolerated, and kind of like adjacent, claiming our greatness. So the word dumb is an interesting choice, but I feel like what kind of spirit meant by this is there's less of, the universe has less tolerance for the ways that we're like knowing that we're beyond something but are still kind of playing into it in some capacity. And so there's a really need to be like, you know, like it's just it's not, there's like a push with the chart ruler for this lunation being Mars retrograde in Leo in the 10th house, this kind of like re-examining our purpose, our legacy, kind of feeling like situations in our life are mirroring like our 10-year-old concept of self and not really our like current up-to-date truly evolved sense of self. And so feeling like situations in our external reality are like poking the bear, so to speak, like being like, oh, I really thought this was over, but the energy of this lunation is like just one step beyond where you've always been. And with the moon so close to Jupiter, there is this like these winds of positive change coming in. And if you can just allow yourself the time to experience grief or whatever is currently present, like really tapping into the reality that the most sacred thing is what is, as the spiritual teacher Blue often talks about. Yeah, just being with yourself as the year comes to a close. And like you can be with the grief of what wasn't and the disappointment and I'm not where I thought I might be, but I'm moving towards something. And there's a lot of elements up in the air. There's like a visual of like people are throwing things, and then it's kind of like that like museum game where you have to like freeze when someone looks around. The things are like literally suspended up in the air, but this momentum is coming. Okay, the next theme, retreating to the cave to reflect and review, revel in the gold that is just for you. I didn't realize that rhymed. That's so funny. Yeah, and so in this like gestation energy of the butterfly, if it feels like there's a lot of eyes on something, not in like a fear-driven way of like they'll take it away, but notice if that comes up too. It's like some of us have the programming, the patterning that like things need to be perfectly formed, like the perfect butterfly, like the already formed butterfly. And if there's any sort of like mess in the process, if there's any sort of messiness, it's like we wouldn't be loved if we just showed up how we actually were. And that's kind of being challenged. There's like there's something that needs to be kept close to the chest. I'll just keep that there, but it's also safe to, with trusted, loving people, share what process you're in, because I'm getting that a lot of us are in kind of like complex processes with Mercury and Mars retrograde under this full moon. Like there's a lot of like, I don't have the words for this, or I just feel like frustrated and like my impulses to assert my agency and my will are being thwarted in some capacity. But like just being able to be with people who are just like, yeah, I get it. The longest nights yield the brightest dawns, definitive endings under this Gemini full moon. Foot coming down, that was an interesting image. The thread has been cut, which I think of like the fates. Yeah, an element of like beyond the personal will, but as always, we don't have to, but we're invited to interact with it. So this could be like an opportunity dropping in, especially for those of us who have placements around 23 degrees of the mutable signs. So Gemini, Virgo, Sagittarius, and Pisces. On the angles in your chart, or if you have the sun, moon, ascendant, personal planets, this could be a really important full moon for you. Interestingly, I got an image of like the mythic figure of Sisyphus, which if you're familiar with this myth around this king figure who doesn't treat, interesting. The flame is really getting blown a lot in the air, and I feel like that's also a message around, like, it kind of goes along with the theme of needing to keep something close to your chest, of like having to physically shield it, like taking a palm over the candle and this like special dream, this impulse within you to kind of shield it a little bit. But even the winds are coming in and it's changing in some capacity, but it's still there. Okay, that's a message for maybe one person. Back to Sisyphus. So he's a king who kills visitors and is punished for the gods. He avoids dying like twice. Again, that 2 theme. But then has to push this boulder up this hill and this hill. And what this one message is like, a lot of us might be, as we approach the end of the year, there's a lot of cycles closing, and there's the like inability to, again, tolerate the ways that we're being small when it's not accurate. I don't know, this kind of like shrinking in some capacity, where there's a need to just put something down, like that exhausting thing you've been pushing for so long. If it's tying up like a loose end on a project, or just because a big prominent theme about the Sisyphus myth is that there's like a inability to move on, because at some point he's kind of entertaining the idea that he has to keep pushing this thing, and while there's this like the gods fated him to do it and it's like a curse, it's also like there is something about like how it's some sort of impulse within him. So if you're noticing these like rote ways of behaving for you that are dying out, like, why did I feel like I needed to say that in a situation in order to appease this person or make them feel like I was trustworthy? That's a weird message. But like the ways that rote actions just become exhausting, and it's like there's a need with this Gemini energy to inject like the energy of the butterfly, this freedom, this like ascension energy, and the ways that you can have that in little moments of your life. Like with a warm drink or sitting on your porch, as I'm doing right now, or just, yeah. Yes, okay, so the next theme, something has been stripped bare, pruned back, but the remaining leaves are vital and show the way forward. A miracle comes in the wake of loss. And as I was writing this, I was reflecting on a tree that had lost, throughout this entire autumn, I'd seen it losing leaves, but the leaves that were there were still green. So I was like, there's been, like, with the butterfly, this shedding process, but we can have faith that what is essential will not leave us, will not abandon us. It's at the core of our being, and therefore we cannot desert it, and it cannot desert us. The last theme that I received was a protective force is guarding sweetness. You are being supported to flourish in ways that you have never allowed yourself before. The force in the subconscious that stands at the doorway, guarding goodness from entering, stands defiant in its discontent. Okay, so this is the energy of, again, massive protection that I feel, but also like the internal parts from childhood, adolescence, early adulthood that are keeping good things at a distance. Because if good things happen to me, what will that mean? Will that mean the rug will be pulled out from me and they will be lost? That I'll inevitably suffer in some capacity after receiving something good? What all of my stories about how things need to be hard, these just keep circling in these intuitive messages that I've been receiving in these videos around putting down a lot of really old narratives. And again, this came up in the Taurus full moon video that I put out in November about putting down the sword. It's just, you can just put it down, okay? Now turning to kind of some astrological things that I wanted to note with this Gemini full moon. This is going to be the first full moon since Pluto has fully ingressed into Aquarius for the long haul, meaning for the next 20 years. And it's conjunct the asteroid goddess Ceres in this full moon chart. And so kind of committing to being changed by what nourishes us, kind of reflecting on this question, what is literally and spiritually feeding you? What is, and maybe that's different than how it's always been, or maybe you require something that your ancestral line was never able to receive or commit to, or getting really honest about cutting the superfluous things that feed you, like the consumptive entertainment, which is fine in some ways, but also really getting down to the heart of what feeds you could really be some kind of thought to some good fodder in that to reflect. So if you're called to journal around this full moon, what feeds you? Okay, so interestingly, we also have a really cool configuration called a Yod, which is also known as the finger of God, which is a funny name under this Gemini full moon. And so that's when we have two planets that are forming a sextile configuration. So they're 60 degrees apart. And so in this case, we have Vesta in the sign of Libra, forming a sextile, so 60 degree aspect to the sun in Sagittarius. And then both of those planets are forming a quincunx, which is a 150 degree aspect to a third planet. So in this case, we have Uranus in Taurus. This is a very tight Yod. They're all within a degree apart of their respective signs. And this feels super powerful in terms of, with the planet Uranus, this liberation quality, this essential change falling into place when we kind of honor the sun and Vesta together with what are we married to, what are we devoted to, what are we tending with the Vesta and her priestesses and tending the sacred flame. Again, that flame theme, interesting, as we approach the solstice, the need to return daily to a spiritual practice or moment or feeling that gives you a sense of light, warmth, safety, a force of liberation flowing like water, a kind of pretty immediate but also kind of gentle if we're aligning with our purpose, with even if we're showing up in old capacities, but how can I honor myself just a little more in this moment, if it's at work, if it's in a relationship. And yeah, I think I will leave it there. And I'm going to turn to get an archetype to guide us, maybe some tarot. The Spirit, how will the Meadow and Hawk Collective experience this Gemini full moon? What is the archetype that we're being called, We're being summoned into embodying even further. Okay, let's feel into this. Okay, there. And what is the archetype that is blocking us, that is hindering us, that is preventing us from stepping into the archetype that is our potential? Okay. Okay, so let's see what that is. I didn't look yet. The desert. Beautiful. Okay. So this kind of affirms or confirms away the blue butterfly image of strength in change. The desert is, you know, this kind of like, it appears to be a barren landscape, even though the creatures that live there, the flora, the fauna, are very well adapted to this setting to live, oh, interesting, to live in a scarcity of resources in an environment that isn't seemingly supportive of life, yet life does flourish here. But it's kind of like an extreme form of life. Like a lot of the life forms, like I'm seeing those lizards that have the like interesting little like water receptacles on their heads to like receive whatever moisture is in the desert. And so there's like these extreme adaptations. And with all of the kind of clarifying messages that I got here around preventing us from stepping into the desert. And again, this also kind of is a version of the cave archetype of a lot of us might be in that sort of dark night of the soul energy of like wandering, pacing, this like feeling lost and disoriented, because with the Vesta Sun configuration, like we've been honoring things, we've been in these karmic contracts, ties that aren't of the highest good. And so it feels like this like barren, exhausting, like parched and I want to stop walking energy. Additionally, we have the nectar, that like sweet thing in the midst of the desert. What is that for you? We have aletheia, we have truth. What is my truth here? Under this Gemini full moon, we have the bridge. In terms of the bridge as an obstacle, it's afraid of change. Oh, it always comes back to that. Afraid. I love this. The flame also came out. We have the nectar and the flame. Turning to that sweet inner practice. When the world is not giving you anything in return, when all of your interactions with people feel like they're not seeing you for who you truly are. The desert. Again, I'm thinking about how I pulled the mirror. Things reflecting some truth about our inner state. Some truth about our inner state. And there's a need to kind of keep reorienting, keep turning back to what is sweet, the nectar. Keep turning back to the sources of nourishment and light, the flame. To keep being willing to be shown that something could be different, that you could cross from a place of darkness to a place of light. The butterfly, the trust that things can change in a positive way, even if the road in between is dark. Again, that kind of doubling theme. I'm seeing two hands here, kind of reaching out. Starborn is also here. Beautiful. Okay, let me see if I can clarify this desert imagery right here. The tarot going. Spirit, how is the energy of the desert showing up around this Gemini full moon? The energy of the desert for us as a Meadow and Hawk collective. The blue butterfly in the desert. The Page of Wands. Okay, this feels exciting. This feels like, you know, the book The Alchemist. Like he's literally going into a desert, which... But, you know, the page, it's this exciting, youthful energy, but in its shadow it can show up as like, you know, this kind of like conquesting, colonizing energy. But if we're kind of like looking towards the new year with this kind of like excitement energy of like going into the place, this like apparently barren place. So maybe some sort of solitude, some sort of reflective place. The energy of the desert. What is the Page of Wands searching for? What is this inner journey leading? Okay, the butterfly, the Eight of Cups. Yes, there are massive chapters that are changing. I really want to emphasize this. And even if you feel like there's these thoughts of like, oh, I'm still in this situation, I still, like, I thought it would be different, but it's not, and this kind of like tension of like, really, this kind of like disappointed kid energy that's like, I thought it was better than this. The answer is yes, it is. There are sweet, beautiful things in life, the Flame and the Nectar energy, but it necessitates going into this grief energy. Like, these past couple days, I've just been feeling these waves of sadness. Like, geez, there's a lot going on in the world. And there's a need to walk. What are we walking away from? What are we walking away from? What are we going into the desert to heal? What are we alchemizing here under this Gemini full moon? The Magician, the ultimate alchemist. Yes, it's waking up to, and this is kind of a whole journey with the Mars retrograde, which is going to be Leo, and then ingressing back into Cancer, and then Leo, and the journey that we're on with this kind of like thwarted, yeah, I want to say thwarted martial energy of, but it kind of, I think it came out in the reverse. So welcoming in this time as a time of dreaming, and like the messages are not coming through very smoothly. So there's something around like some sort of like frustrated message, like a message wants to come through, but it's not. The Page of Swords. Interesting. So people want to, we want to say a lot. There's a want to like set things in order and close chapters, but there's this third element. Interesting. There's like there's an ethereal element at play here, and it wants us to be open to the reality that we could have what we want. But it's also kind of like this like more youthful energy, so tapping into the energy of this like explorer. If you can have this like curious, like bubbly joy, like effervescent energy around like, oh boy, like there's so much potential, like my life is a work of art and I have so much, I have the gift of living it. Like really, if we kind of turn away from that, like we're honoring it, but also, you know, being willing to set it down, this energy of like this heaviness, and then turning towards the light, towards the flame and the nectar. So I invite you to turn toward what is sweet, what is nourishing, what is affirming, what is life affirming under this Gemini. Yeah. Waking up to the truth that the fear of the monster under the bed is just that. Is just that. Okay. I think I'm gonna pull one more and then say farewell. Exactly. Oh my god. Yeah, the 9, we have the 8 and the 9. Yeah, the 8 of 9 of swords in the reverse position. So like seeing how this like matrix of fear fear is just an illusion. It's an illusion, and not to like discount or spiritually bypass real hard, tough things in our lives. But the message that I'm getting is like your success is inevitable. Your joy, your flourishing is inevitable. Once you pick up the tools of your life, whether that's a pen, whether that's, turn towards yourself. Turn towards yourself when it gets like painful and you want to turn away, and kind of turn towards this like, just like satiating some need to be entertained versus to know what is true. Interesting. This is an invitation to go on some kind of journey, and whatever that journey may be, I hope that it is nourishing and that it's filled with a lot of light and a lot of hope. And just keep tuning into that energy, the blue butterfly. You're being protected through this time of change, and the being that you will be on the other side is the person that you dreamed of being as a child. And so I'm gonna leave that there. Much love, and enjoy this Gemini full moon.